Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, family and friends of the Mighty McRae third grade class. We're so glad you're here today, or tonight. Sorry, Kavya. The children, you know for sure if you're a parent that the children have been coming in for weeks early to practice before school even started, and they've been very dedicated and they work really hard, so we hope you enjoy the show.
Act 1, Leaving Leiden, Holland. Exactly 400 years ago, our group of very religious English families were getting concerned about recent developments near our adopted hometown of Leiden, Holland. A minister addressed us after church.
My fellow worshippers, we have been living here in Holland for almost 10 years now. Looking back on it, I think we all can agree it was a good decision to leave our English village and settle in Leiden. We've been free to worship according to our own interpretation of Holy Scripture. But as you know, there are dark clouds on the horizon, and I'm sad to say that we really need to start planning our next move.
Back home to England?
No, we can't go backwards. As much as I love our precious homeland, the Church of England's more rooted there than ever.
They still want to control exactly how we worship on Sundays.
And with every passing year, the bishops get more woven into the fabric of government there. It saddens me to say that we will never be accepted in our own country.
We've already sacrificed so much. Can't we just stay here in Holland? Maybe just move a bit deeper into the Dutch countryside?
No, John, I'm afraid not. The days of religious liberty are drawing to a close here too. It appears that within a few years, Holland won't be any more accepting of us than England.
Well, what's your idea then?
It's becoming more clear to me that moving to Holland was just the first stepping stone on a much greater journey that God has in mind for our group. Our daily toil and hardships I now view as nothing more than training, a rehearsal if you like. It appears that our true destiny is to settle into the new world.
The new world? Act 2, Alone from London.
And so began an intense period of planning and preparation for our relocation across the Atlantic Ocean. We are not the first to attempt the trip. In fact, there have been frequent journeys by commercial traders back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean. However, early attempts at settlement had failed disastrously. Attempts at Jamestown, Virginia, and in modern-day Maine with a tremendous loss of life.
As our Leiden Church elders did their research, they soon found there was a legal and financial path that must be followed by any prospective settlers. A group of wealthy English merchants would finance attempts at colonizing the east coast of America. So our pilgrim leaders left Leiden for London, seeking their investment. The merchants agreed to provide most of the money needed for the voyage in exchange for a share of the future profits that would result from our hard work. Let's listen in.
Robert, we are not about to risk our invested money on a group of religious friends alone. You will need skilled tradesmen alongside you in the new world. Blacksmiths, coopers, builders, and someone with military skills to help protect you from the Indians. While these tradesmen and their families are not of your congregation and may be strangers to you, we insist that they join your venture.
If those are the terms, we will abide by them. But let's be clear, for the Atlantic crossing, my group of pilgrims will be aboard our own vessel, the Speedwell. You strangers can be aboard the main ship once we get it, along with most of the supplies.
Fine then. Here, sir, is your patent. This patent is a legal contract issued by the Virginian Company, authorizing your group to settle in one location only, at the mouth of the Hudson River in northern Virginia. nowhere else.
Understood.
This money is to purchase here in England. All that you will need for the voyage and for your first few months of setting up. Tell me again, what will you be buying?
Well, we already own one ship, the Speedwell, but we will use these funds to rent a larger one, since we'll need 2 ships for the voyage. We need to pay the captains and crews on both of the ships. Then, there's a long list of supplies to be bought. Salted beef and pork, hardtack, dried vegetables, beer, fishing supplies, muskets and armor, clothing, tools of all types, trinkets to trade with the Indians, and 100 other odds and ends.
Very good. Now please move with haste, Robert. Summer is almost upon us, and if you arrive in winter, you'll freeze to death, and our money will be wasted.
Act 3. The Speedwell didn't speed well. By midsummer, everything was slowly coming together. A group of 125 pilgrims left the Dutch port in their own sailing ship, the Speedwell. And a separate, much larger ship, the Mayflower, left from London. Both ships were to link up in the English port of Southampton before setting off across the Atlantic. The Mayflower was now heavily loaded with supplies. It also carried a few dozen future settlers we referred to as the strangers. They were not religious at all. They were simply aiming for an independent, prosperous life in the New World. Once both ships docked at Southampton, we pilgrims met these strangers and a few sailors for the very first time. We were all excited to get going on our great adventure. Finally, both ships left port together and headed west. But as soon as we turned away from the protected coastline, we found out that the Speedwell had serious problems.
She's leaking like a faucet. Get me a bucket and a mallet. More buckets, quickly!
After several days of limping along, it was decided that both ships should put into the English port of Dartmouth for repairs. It was now mid-August. The repairs went well, but when it came time to leave port, the wind had died completely. Day turned to night. Still no wind. The ships just bobbed up and down, waiting for a breeze. Another day passed.
Many of us started to grumble about the wisdom of continuing at this late stage of the season, but the ships could not even return to the dock. Eventually, the wind freshened enough to push us on our way again. Finally, we began to make some good progress. But a few days later, in rough seas, the dreaded problem returned.
She's leaking again! We'll never make it.
That's it. We have no more time to waste. We must give up on the Speedwell, or we'd still be stumbling around here in December, for goodness sake.
Agreed. We'll return to port and sell this monster. Get whatever money we can to pay off at least some of our loans. We'll transfer whatever cargo we can to Mayflower. Just cram as much as we can into the one ship.
And let those passengers stay behind in England? Do so. We don't have the space to bring everyone now anyway. The loss of the Speedwell was a major blow. It not only cost us pilgrims a lot of money, but we had wasted a full month of just trying to pull away from the coast of England. I was worried.
I must admit, I was worried also. My husband did not want to give up on God's plan for us. As soon as both ships returned to dock, dozens of men, women, children abandoned the whole effort, even quite a few of our pilgrim families. They were heartbroken. I watched them lumbering off carrying a few of their possessions. They wished us well, but everybody knew it was likely to be a permanent goodbye. board the Mayflower, the remainder of our little community, pilgrims, strangers, and sailors, were now squished together in tighter spaces on just the one ship. Tensions were high due to our multiple setbacks.
But on September 6th, our fully loaded Mayflower caught a fresh wind in her sails, and Captain Jones pointed due west toward the New World.
Act 4, Atlantic Crossing. The voyage was too dangerous and deck space too limited for us passengers to remain up on deck, except for brief spells. We spent most of our days and nights between the top deck and the storage holds below. As you can see, this dark and dank space was cramped, crowded, and got chillier as the day stretched on and on. For 8 weeks, the Mayflower slowly inched her way across the great open expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, throughout largely at the mercy of local wind speed and direction. She occasionally weathered furious storms, soaking as passengers with wind-whipped rain and sprays of seawater. On other days, she just stalled, drifting aimlessly, her sails limp, waiting for a breath of wind to develop. The Mayflower progressed westward at an average speed of just 2 miles per hour, which is about as fast as I am walking right now.
Food and water was running low. One of our pregnant passengers gave birth. Various illnesses took hold. A sailor was lost overboard, and the mood on board soured, and arguments broke out as the days grew shorter and colder.
Then, suddenly, a precious glimmer of hope flew overhead one chilly afternoon.
Mother, a seagull! I can see a seagull! Where? I've been looking up every day, and that's the very first bird I've seen since we left England. And you said... Yes, Constance, it means we're getting close to land. And look at the watercolor. It's getting greener. It's getting shallower. Finally! Can you see me land, John?
No, ma'am, but Captain Jones has us on 24-hour watch now, so we must be close. He needs to get back down between decks. Act 5, heading to the Hudson River. Wintow!
At daybreak on November 9th, after 65 days at sea, land was finally spotted. The Atlantic Ocean has been crossed. The Mayflower's pilot identified our location from the soaring cliffs he had seen on previous crossing trips to the area.
Captain, I believe we're off the northerly tip of Cape Cod.
We must offload right here. My crew is exhausted and the passengers can't continue on much longer. There is so much sickness on board and little water left. Everyone really needs to get ashore.
But sir, our patent is for settling at the mouth of the Hudson. We have no legal right to settle here. How much lies ahead of us?
Well, there are no reliable maps of this area, but I believe we are roughly 200 miles away. So, 2 or 3 days perhaps, if the wind holds. But look here, these waters are shallow, and there is an extreme risk of running aground if the wind turns against us.
The good Lord has protected us thus far. I am sure he won't forsake us now. Please push on, Captain Jones. Just the sight of land has been a healthy tonic for all of us.
Turn to the south.
Against his better judgment, the captain turned the Mayflower to the south. Without reliable depth charts, our crew used the sounding leads to call out water depths. Heavily loaded, we needed at least 12 feet of water to avoid running aground.
45 feet, 38 feet, 42 feet.
For the first 5 hours, all was well. The Mayflower ran before a steady northerly breeze, but in the late afternoon, the wind gradually died down, just as we approached underwater shoals off present-day Chatham.
25 feet, 18 feet, 21 feet.
Captain, can we turn back? We're almost aground.
I can't. With this wind so calm, we have almost no forward speed. We're just drifting. Prepare to abandon ship. 16 feet, 18 feet, 14 feet. With daylight fading fast, the Mayflower drifted aimlessly toward the shallow shoals lurking underneath her hull.
But then the breeze returned, this time from the south, enabling the Mayflower to avoid disaster by heading back in the direction which we'd come from. Fortunately, this wind shift saved the Mayflower and all of us passengers aboard.
But our dream of creating a village at the mouth of the Hudson River were now dashed. With sickness on board and supplies low, and winter fast approaching, we were forced to look for a new piece of land to settle, well northeast of the Hudson.
Act 6. Every man for himself. Aware their precious legal contract was now unraveling, frustrations boiled over and arguments arose amongst us. We mayn't be in a sinking ship for the moment, our finances have surely run aground. Many of us only join this venture to make big money here in the New World. Our contract with the rest of the pilgrims is now over, finished. When we land on Cape Cod tomorrow, it's every man for himself.
Yeah!
Stephen, all of you, every man for himself is the path of ruin. We pilgrims will not be splintering apart. We are a congregation. We are willingly bound by a spiritual covenant to support each other and care for each other, no matter what misfortunes tossed in our path. Misfortune? Winter is almost upon us, and we have not even a plan for how to survive it. Do what you please with your souls, John, but there are many of us here who are not bound by a religious covenant. We didn't come along to join a new church. We came to make a new life, a life of riches, protected by that legal contract. But since we can't reach the Hudson, there's nothing to bind you to us or us to you. Let's just go our separate ways tomorrow and look after our own selves. So, you can build a house with your own 2 hands, can you? If you get sick and you're too feeble to feed yourself, who will care for you? When the knaves attack late at night, who will defend you? You may not share our religious beliefs, Stephen,
But we must all bind together even more tightly now, whether you can admit it or not. Whether you like it or not. It's November. We are at the doorstep to winter with not even one roof on dry land. Our food is low. Who knows how the natives will react to us settling on their land? Whether you can admit it or not, we need every single one of us pulling together to even survive the winter.
What are you suggesting, John? I'm us to join a crazy religious group? Most of us aren't even believers.
No, Stephen, of course not. We may never become one congregation, but we can become one community. We just need to agree on a set of rules and a community structure now, before we even put one foot ashore. Let's share our ideas and come up with a new contract, one that we will all sign as a written record for our decisions. Please.
Man, I think John is right. The risk of disorder or disaster is just too high if we go our separate ways. Join me and Pilgrim leaders in looking up the compact to guide us in the days and months ahead. Let's do the path to democracy and order.
And so the two groups gathered together, the Pilgrims and the strangers. Over the course of the next days, the Mayflower bobbed its way back northward along the shore of Cape Cod. We hammered out what has come to be known as the Mayflower Compact. Compromise between both groups became necessary. When deciding on a set of rules and procedures for our colony, all of us agreed to a clear separation of religious beliefs from everyday civic life.
We have spent all day in negotiations and compromise. At first light tomorrow, I ask all able-bodied men to sign this document as proof that you agree with it and pledge to live by it.
And so it was that in the early morning hours of November 11, 1620, all the male passengers assembled in the Mayflower cabin to sign the compact. Every man who was healthy enough signed his name, or if he couldn't write, scratched an X in ink.
Mother, this seems to be a very important document. Why are only the men signing it? Shouldn't you be signing it too?
No, child. Even in England and Holland, it is only men who can sign documents. We are bound by what the men agree to.
Well, that doesn't seem very fair. And we're not in Europe any longer. Maybe here in the New World, women should have an equal say?
Not in 100 years.
Well, maybe in 300 then.
Act 7. Searching Cape Cod Bay.
On this same morning, the Mayflower was anchored inside the tip of Cape Cod at what is now Provincetown Harbor. A smaller rowboat was sent ashore with 16 well-armed men, while the rest of us remained on the ship.
This area looks open, sandy, empty, not exactly reminding me of the farmland back home.
And not a living soul either. Where are the Indian villages the Codfishermen spoke of?
Those bloodthirsty natives are probably hiding right behind those dunes, waiting to attack. We must keep our guards at all times.
Look, they made it to shore. Oh, what joy. I so wish I could put my feet on solid land again. We've been on the ship for so long.
67 days and counting.
After hours of walking across the beaches and dune hills, the 16 men who won the shore that day returned to the Mayflower. Their little boat weighed down with dry wood. That afternoon, all of us on board enjoyed for the first time in weeks the warmth of a crackling fire.
seems like you had a successful day. There were no signs of any Indians. You obviously found plenty of firewood. Why don't we just start offloading the Mayflower and settle right here?
Well, yes, we had a successful first day, but this tip of Cape Cod lacks so much of what we need. It's quite exposed to storms, and there is no river to speak of. And there must be 1,000 pounds of sand for every pound of real soil.
Since we can't swap the Hudson, we really need to concentrate on finding a spot that meets most of our needs. There's no point in starting to build houses and then later on having to pick up and move because of some problem with the place we chose.
Mother, can we bathe and wash our clothes tomorrow? It's been 7 weeks.
Of course not, child. Tomorrow is the Sabbath. We will all be aboard the Mayflower here and worship the entire day. But Monday, yes, we're all going on shore for a few hours. We'll bring lots of soap.
What a blessing!
Act 8, Hanging by a Thread.
That first trip ashore stretched into a full month of exploration. Groups of armed men would leave the Mayflower, sometimes for hours, often for several days. They navigated away much of Cape Cod Bay, searching for a suitable settlement site. It was disappointing. They never found a river. There was little soil suitable for growing crops, and the bay was shallow everywhere, so the Mayflower could not be brought back in close to shore.
Meanwhile, the daylight hours got fewer each day. Our explorers were often freezing cold and sometimes so ill they needed to cut short their exploring and quick retreat back to the Mayflower. Snow fell. Wet clothes iced up. Our women and children remained huddled right here on board. It was almost 4 months now since we had set out from Southampton. In mid-December, our men finally stumbled upon an abandoned Indian village in present-day Plymouth. They could see a wide tract of land had been cleared by the Indians for crops. A stream emptied into the bay nearby, offering ample fresh water, and a high hill sloped up from the water's edge, suitable for a future fort.
And so, after a full month of searching the Cape Cod Bay, our elders decided to end the wandering and settle right there, 2 days before Christmas. A work party went ashore to begin construction of the very first house.
So, what happened to the Mayflower, these people, and their settlement? Let's find out. Captain Jones, what happened to the Mayflower?
That first winter, the Mayflower was kept offshore, anchored offshore. It became a hospital ship sheltering the sick and dying. On April 5th, she left Plymouth and never returned. Within a few years, she rotted and was broken up for scrap.
Sailor Joshua, what happened to the crew?
More than a dozen of us died that first cruel winter. Despite that, one of our group, John Alden, was inspired by the settlers and decided to stay with them in Plymouth. The rest of us, we continued our employment with Captain Jones and sailed the Mayflower back to England as soon as the weather warmed.
Dorothy, what happened to the strangers?
We fared a little bit better than the Pilgrims that first hard winter, but we still lost many good people. Those of us who survived made a decent life of ourselves in the new world. We like to think that we helped to launch America with a free and diverse spirit.
John Carver, what happened to the Pilgrims?
Oh, our precious congregation. That first winter was brutal on us. Only about half of us were still standing by April. Oh, the death, the misery.
That original group of about 100 settlers paid a huge price for arriving so late in the year. By February and March, they were losing as many as 2 or 3 per day in the bitter cold. Wives became widows. Children became orphans. In several cases, entire families were lost.
But I must say, the Mayflower Compact that was created aboard that ship was key to any of us surviving the first winter. We helped each other in our greatest times of need, regardless of religion, whether we believed in God or not. Our very survival showed the wisdom of keeping church and state separate here in America.
So, they persevered, clinging to the certainty of an eventual turn of spring, warmth, and new life. Word trickled back to England that a few houses had been built, crops planted. A smaller ship, the Fortune, arrived in the first autumn with another 36 willing settlers. More families came. Finally, against all odds, an English settlement had taken permanent root in North America.
So there's many people that we need to thank for this production taking this shape after, I'm sure some of the parents that came for the first rehearsal thought, what, 8 acts? They're memorizing lines, these words, they don't quite know what some of these words mean. But the, please step forward, I'm sure you've seen him back and forth here. This is our playwright, my husband David. And he wrote the play 3 years ago for me, because I said I really wanted to change up my play that I was always doing, so he wrote the play, and the first draft was, I said, well, that's kind of good for a college students, but so, but he never lost hope that knew that these kids were going to be able to bring this all together. Also, Gavin here is our assistant stage manager, and we could not have done it without him. On the straight and narrow with the props and all the on and off and where everybody was supposed to be. So he was invaluable today, or not today, tonight. And Mrs. Solis is back there too. She's helped every night, I think for 14 years now, but every time I do a play, she's always helping me backstage. So Mrs. Solis, where are you? There she is. She will come out. Yeah. Mrs. Solis works at kindergarten. Again, thank you to all the parents that came and helped on those early morning practices. It really, we couldn't do it without all that support. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Oh, it's beautiful.
My name is Grace. Just wanted to thank you for everything this year. This play was incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. I can't believe it's 3rd graders. And just thank you for all your support for all the kids all year. Thank you.